Yeah. Hey, this that special sauce. Spill that drip, I wipe it off. $1 million worth of game. Can't feel that I work too hard. Poetry on these songs.
What's good to all my stoners, hippies, and hip-hop enthusiasts? It's your boy, Dope Boy Diesel, coming back in another edition of Doja Thoughts, okay? We had to record this one because we tried to do the Diddy trial live, but DDG dropped his bombshell today. We went through that. That video was posted in my X account. Again, if you want to know everything that I'm doing and keep up with everything that I'm doing, it's best that you go ahead and lock in with me on X, just so that you can be, I like my mic right here. I don't like the camera focusing on my mic, but I like my mic right here. But I want you to just go ahead and lock in with us there on X, because that's where I pretty much post all of my stuff, from videos to articles to music, just about anything you can find there. Yeah. Just about anything you can find there. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here today in Doja Thoughts, since I am going to be going on vacation. So this is how we're going to be giving up the Diddy recaps. Okay, we're going to just be dropping a couple of videos, tuning in that way. And if I can go live, that's what we'll be doing. All right. So what we're going to be doing today on Doja Thoughts is going through day 16 of the Diddy trial. Okay. This is day 16. We're going to run it like normal. And if you guys have been keeping up with my coverage thus far, then you already know how we run this. Okay, so where we left off last time, Diddy's team, basically, it would seem they kind of had contention with some evidence that was being presented along with this witness, Jane. I don't think we have a last name for her, but that seems to be the whole premise of everything going on. Okay, so it says, before the jury comes in, the judge says, what about the witness conflicts with other romantic partners? The AUSA says the last one was a colleague, not a girlfriend. It says none of this is in the docket despite Inner City Press filing the judge's orders. Okay, none of this stuff is in the docket. It says this is Diddy's team. It says this is impeachment material. Then the judge says these are assaults under Rule 608. Is that fair? And he says it's not 608. He says we're happy to provide the proffer ex parte. It's difficult to explain the fact. So they're going through their legal jargon. Obviously, we're here for the meat and potatoes, so I won't bore you guys to death with all the legal jargon. We'll get through that later in the breakdown. Okay, so we want to get to the part where they bring in Jane. Let me just make sure I got the exact point, because she comes in somewhere in between here. The judge is asking about something. Okay, they say this is the prosecution. They say we're working on a different instruction before the testimony of Jane on a pseudonym issue. Okay, I guess she's trying to remain anonymous. It says, just hand it up if you agree, and I will read it. Does witness Brianna Bongolan, it's crazy ass name, need a Fifth Amendment immunity order? He says yes. Everybody's taking immunity orders, pleading the Fifth and shit. He said, I'll ask our courtroom deputy to check our jury. And the jury's entering. Okay. He says, first, we wish to enter some exhibits into the evidence before jury A. Let them get through that. Okay. Let's get to the witness. Where are we at? Okay. He says, witness in suit is sworn in. You have a one witness. They're not saying who it is. They're just saying witness in suit. It says, where do you work? Now, this person's, I'm guessing his last name is Plaza. He says, legal audio and video. He says, have you ever testified before? He says, mostly criminal matters. I've done some civil and disposition. He says, have you ever been qualified as an expert? He says 50 times. We move to qualify Mr. Or maybe his name is Piazza, but we're just going to call him Pizza or Pazza, Piazza. We should just call his ass Pizza. As an expert. No objection, he says. The judge says he's an expert. How many times have you worked for SDNY? He says 50 or 100 times. Does that impact your testimony? He says, no, I do 75% defense work. So he does work for the defense as well, unlike the therapist who came in earlier in the trial, who basically is just a career witness or stand person, okay? That's all she does. They asked, are you being paid? What's your hourly rate? He said, $2.95. They said, dollars? He says, yes. You analyze cell phone videos and surveillance videos. He said, yes. Let me show you. And then he shows a video of a towel's comb kicking Cassie on the ground, and it's shown. So it seems like this is the guy who originally recorded these videos on his phone and kept it to show to his girlfriend. And we heard about him earlier in the trial. They said, what is this frame rate? He said frame rate per second. It can cause a video to have more info per second. He said this cell phone video of a video was shot on an iPhone 6, 30 frames per second. It was not editorial or tampered with, I found. And this is what he was saying. The prosecution comes back and said, did you reach a conclusion? He says that they are accurate. They said in the surveillance videos, he says there were issues. The clock was sent to play 30 frames a second, but this was 22 frames. So it played faster. We had to account for that. They asked how. He says we counted the frames and used the software to correct the timing. They asked where were the surveillance videos altered? They asked were the surveillance videos altered? And he said no. He said here the video stream was corrupted. That has caused the distortion. They asked the whole file or just these small pieces. He says the corruption exists in the video stream. There is a secured called a GOP, a group of pictures. We have predictive frames. You don't know this, but a static camera does not re-record a wall that doesn't move each second. It is repeated. Only what moves is recorded. And they say thank you. It says play 55 seconds. They show a video of Mr. Combs. He's doing his thing, yada, yada. Did you see pixelation? He says yes. Does it represent manipulation? He says no. You can choose motion activity. The camera only turns on when there's motion, but it causes timestamp issues. Go back frame by frame. I want to point something out, he says. He says this seems to be a collision of two issues. He says, look at the male sitting down. There appears to be a ghost of a person. The motion activity begins to sense that we have motion. Now there is a full figure in the frame. That file is corrupted. They said, did you make a compilation? He says, yes. Your office requested it. They are edited to track the movement of individuals inside the event. They asked, does it have different camera angles? He says, yes. How did you show the changes? He says, a black screen. Is this the compilation? He says, yes. They said, play the first 30 seconds. What's happening? He said, the male is running down the hallway. He throws her down, and he says he's now dragging her on the screen. They asked, what did the man just do? He says he's dragging the woman holding a bag. How? They asked, what is he holding? He says it appears to be a cell phone glowing. They say, let's focus on what happens in the mirror. Play it. What happened? He says the male picked up a small object. So what they're looking at in court, obviously, is a compilation, different angles of the video playing all at the same time. That's basically what they're watching in court right now, okay? He says the male picked up a small object, what appears to be a vase, and threw it across the room at a woman. Continue playing. Who is emerging now? He says the female, with a duffel in her luggage. They say, now who? He says, the security person. They ask, now the man, Combs, walks away. Holding what? He says it appears to be a cell phone. He puts it to his ear. They say, you find these accurate? He says, yes. And this was all the footage I had. They say, let's turn to the sex videos. 201 and 210. Let me clarify, these are under seal. These were recovered from the Frank Black user on a device provided to the U.S. Marshals by Miss Ventura. These are enhanced versions of the original videos created in 2012 and 2014. Mr. Paeza, what were you asked to do with the sexually explicit video? They ask. And he says, enhance the audio component. We admitted these videos into evidence and no further questions. They have no further questions. The defense comes back and they say, what is your understanding of the source of those surveillance videos? He says the native system. They ask, how did they come to your possession? He says they were exported and transcoded. They said, who gave the surveillance video to you? He said the U.S. Attorney's Office. They asked, who gave it to them? He says, I don't know. Did you say it was from a cheap system? He says, I don't think I said that. Let me show you notes. 3500. Okay. This is only for the witness, they say. The judge says yes. He says, so you called it cheap. He says, I don't know when it was documented or was created. They said, but you thought the system was cheap. He says, in a way. They say, let us play you, and then they name another recording, I'm guessing. Let's just get the rest of this to come up. You gotta excuse the slowness. I'm not home. I'm not in the Doja room originally. Just Doja thoughts. So the defense says there are 2 minutes not shown. He says this is my corrected version, but there are a few issues that we cannot correct. The system is buffering some of that time, and some portions were motion activated. They say let's again play the male coming into the elevator bank at 11:02, and then the timestamps are jumping around. They say on the video, Cassie is being kicked on the ground. It's constantly playing catch up. They say play ahead. We're at 11:28. They say the female picks up the house phone. There's some sort of cut. Can you explain? He says, can you back up and go frame by frame? They say sure. But is the male separated from her? He says yes. The bag drop triggered it. A 10-second difference. There's a programming note. He said, even I lost track of the thread for some time, kept reverting to on the ground 1 hour ago, now resuming, but this needs to be fixed. So the defense comes back in and says, let's watch it again. Did we just jump about 10 seconds on that timestamp? He says yes. There's about 5 seconds offset between the two cameras. That's what you just showed. He says, okay, the female picks up the phone and the male walks away. Start again, please. This is his walking away. They ask that. He says yes. They say play more. Did you see the translucent or ghost-like figure in the cell phone video as in the surveillance video? They said the cell phone video was not high quality enough to capture it, but it's not there. They say it's not. Mr. Piazza, thank you so much for coming. We have no further questions. The judge says, Ms. Samizer. They says, so they are 5 minutes off. He says, my notes told me that there was a 5-minute, 55-second difference and an offset of 5 seconds. This is him talking to the prosecution again. It said, do you have videos that reliably and accurately depict what happened? He says, yes. They say, you may go. He said, before the next witness, a sidebar. So they're back. The government calls Brian Bogolin. We're going to call her or call him Brianna. It's a crazy name. This is a crazy name. What else are you called? He said, Banna. They said Banna. Whoever this is, boy, girl, I don't know. What are you working? They said fashion design. What did Mr. Combs do to you? Oh man, now we're getting into it. I don't know what that other shit was, but now we're getting into it. That was a snooze fest. Jesus Christ. Okay. They said he held me over a 17th story balcony. Now, I said that this seems to be a pattern of behavior that he has. And it would seem that even though Wale's adamantly denying it, I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure he did this to Wale. And we probably could have Wale testifying, but Wale is not touching this shit with a 10-foot pole. So he doesn't want to talk about it, which is unfortunate, but I would love to hear about it. He said he held me over a 17th story balcony. They said, after any effects? He said, night terrors. I wake up in my sleep. They asked, who is this photo? He said, it's Cassandra Ventura, Cassie, my friend. I met her in 2013 at Young and Reckless, the streetwear company, then at Diamond Designs. How would you describe Cassie's relationship with Mr. Combs? She said, volatile. I did not want to. Let me see if I can pull this person up. Because it's going to drive me crazy not knowing what this person looks like, or if I'm talking about a boy or a girl. This is a woman? Is this her? No, I'm seeing this is about two different, okay. They over here showing like two different women over here, but this is the woman. This is her right here. Let me make sure y'all can see what I'm seeing real quick. Okay. Let me show y'all exactly who Brianna, and this is going to be the short lady right here. The little short lady. That's her. That's who's coming up on the stand right now and who's taking over talking, okay? Let me just switch this up. All right. So let's get back into what she asked. Damn, Diddy, you was hanging this little girl over a fucking... Okay, let's get into it. They said, after any effects, she says, night terrors. I wake up in my sleep. They said, who's this? It says, Cassie Ventura, Cassie, my friend. I met her in 2013 at Young and Reckless, the streetwear company, then at Diamond Designs. How would you describe Cassie's relationship with Mr. Combs? She said, volatile. I did not want to meet him right away. I had seen black eyes. She had begged me to meet him. He said, did you design work for Mr. Combs? She said, a little. Where did Mr. Combs live? She said, I think Beverly Hills. They say objection. It was speculation. I don't know what they objected for, but they said, the judge says, ask another question. The prosecution comes back and they said, did you know the name of the street? She said, Mapleton, 200 South Mapleton. What did you do with Cassie? She said, drugs. And we'd go shopping. We'd hang out with Deontay and others. They asked, is this a photo of you and Cassie shopping? She said, yes, in April 2016. Puff texted Cassie, asked where she was. Sent a list where we'd been. He sent a list of places where she been at. Like, I don't even need you to really answer the question. I got it right here. I just want to know if you're going to tell the truth. Okay? They asked, had you or Cassie told Mr. Combs where you were? She said no. How did it make you feel? They said objection. It was overruled. She said, like, oh my God, he knows where we've been. They asked, were you sleep at Cassie's? She said, oh no. They asked, where would you sleep at Cassie's? And she said, a couch or a balcony. Then they asked, did Mr. Combs come over? She said, yes. He banged on the door and came in. They said, did you know how? She says, I don't know. He was upset. He threw a knife in her direction. Yo, it seems like every single witness has something new to add to the story, all of this craziness. Every person has something they've seen this man do to Cassie, and we get a new soundbite every day. Oh shit. Okay. So he says he threw a knife in her direction and she threw it back. And he left swiftly. That's just how they was getting down. Wow. That was just some everyday regular degular for them. They asked, were you doing drugs? She says, I don't remember. Did you call the police? She says, no. Why not? She says, I was scared. Did you see injuries on Cassie? She says she showed me on FaceTime before makeup for the perfect match. What did she say? She was quiet, she answered. We were at the party at the Blind Dragon, a karaoke bar in West Hollywood. Then we went to Cassie's house to help her pack. Deontay was there, and Puff came. They said, are you under subpoena? She says, yes. I won't get in trouble if I'm truthful. Did Mr. Combs provide you drugs? She said, yes. One was called G. I am not an avid user. Ketamine, marijuana, cocaine. How often did you get drugs for Cassie? She said, often. Those oxy pills. They said, did she pay you? She said, yes. Did you get drugs for Mr. Combs? She said, yes, once cocaine. Did you sell drugs to others? She said, yes, sometimes. Did you try with Cassie to stop drugs? She said, yes. We tried to cook, but there were a lot of drugs around, she says. Has Mr. Combs ever threatened you? She says, yes. Let me show you a photo from April 2016. Who is it? Or who's in it? She says a photographer who goes by the name Bad Boy with an I. We thought it was cool that was his name. We thought he made some sort of art. Puff came up close to my face and said, I am the devil and I could kill you. And then she starts sobbing when she says that. They asked, were you taking drugs that day? So they asked, were you taking drugs that day? And she says, probably cocaine. Okay? She says, probably cocaine. They asked, did you continue to see Mr. Combs? Did you consider you see Mr. Combs? What the fuck? Did you continue to see Mr. Combs? I'm guessing that was a typo. She said yes. They asked why. She says, I don't know. Did you tell the government about this threat in your first meeting? She says no. They asked why. They say objection. It was sustained. And they ask, can we break here? They take a break and come back. The judge says anything before we bring in the jury. They say no disputes. And they laugh. They says, but we do think Jane will not get on the stand today, given how this is going. We would like to get Enrique Santos on today, some exhibits for Jane and text issues. Okay, so they probably won't get to Jane is basically what they're saying here. We get back to Boglin coming back in. They asked, what happened on the balcony? She says, I was there. She just says, I was there. They said, now was there? What are they talking about? She says, Cassie and my ex-girlfriend at the time. I guess her name was Now. They asked, what were you doing? She says, sleeping on the couch with my ex. They asked, doing drugs? She says, I don't recall. What did you do when Mr. Combs arrived? She says, I took my ex-girlfriend to the bathroom. I went, shh. They asked why. She says, I didn't want to expose her to what I saw. They said, then? She says, we went out to the balcony and either lit a blunt or I was about to. She said, Mr. Combs came up behind me on the balcony. He lifted me up and put me on the railing. They said, can you show us how he held you? She said, to myself. She said, show us. How much did you weigh? She says, I can't say because of the drugs. I was about 115 pounds. They asked, what did Mr. Combs scream at you? He yelled, you know what the fuck you did. I said back, I don't know what the fuck I did. How long did he hold you there? She said, how long it takes to say multiple times, you know what the fuck you did. They then continue. They say, what next? She says, he threw me on the balcony furniture. They ask, were you injured? She says, I didn't know at first. What did Cassie say? Along the lines of, did you just hang over the balcony? Then I heard her girlfriend is in the house. He left and I left. I wanted to take a shower. I felt disgusted. I saw the huge bruise on my leg with like a piercing in the middle. I had back and neck pain. So Jesus Christ, she had a lot going on herself. They said, is this photo fair and accurate, a representation of your leg? And they show a photo of her leg, I'm guessing. She says, yes. She says, I called one of my managers and they said, if you're scared of anything else, just go to a chiropractor. They said, did you tell the chiropractor who done it to you? She said, no. They asked, but I just paid and took the neck brace. Is the neck brace in this photo of you? She says, yes. Did you ever talk with Mr. Combs about this? She said, I said I don't want any problems with you. He didn't say anything. When did you last see him? She said, January 2nd of 2018. How do you remember? She says, I tattooed the date on myself. God damn, what kind of weird shit is this? What do you mean you tattooed the date on yourself? This is crazy. They said, why? She said, it's the day I decided to get sober. Okay, fair enough. She said it was New Year's Eve, or New Year's. It was a New Year's thing in Miami at the one hotel. Puff and Cassie and I did 8 hours of ketamine together. Holy. They asked, are you aware Cassie included the balcony incident in her complaint? She said, yes. I told her she had her facts wrong. It wasn't a hotel. And Tiffany, have you talked with Cassie about your testimony or hers? She says, no. I had nightmares. I scream. When was the last time you had nightmares? She said the other day. Have you ever hired a lawyer about the balcony incident? She says, yes. My first lawyer hired in January 2024. They said, did you ever mention everything in your first meeting with us? She said, no. Did your first lawyer sent demand letters to Mr. Combs? She said, multiple. And the demand was high. He picked it. They said, did you approve the letters? She said, no. They were incorrect. I let him go. They asked who? She said, Tyrone Blackburn. Did people reach out to you? She said, Tiffany, Cassie, the producer, Rob Holiday. Was he friends with Mr. Combs? She said, yes. May we have a sidebar? The judge says we may. They have a sidebar. They come back. She comes back and the prosecution says, who did Mr. Holiday say he was calling for? She said, Puff. What offer was he authorized to offer? They say an objection. It was sustained. They said, how did you feel during the call? She says, I declined the offer. He said, not repulsive. No, not responsive. And the judge says, sustained. Move on unless you are prepared to ask some of the foundational questions we discussed at the sidebar. They move on and they ask, did you talk with him again? She says no. After yet, they have another sidebar and they come back. He says the objections are sustained. Move on. He says the prosecution comes back and asks, your lawsuit, did you write it? She says no. They ask, how much is being requested? That girl said $10 million. They said nothing further. Cross-examination comes in, the defense. This is Diddy's side. They say, yes, please. They said, I need to ask you some questions. You have immunity as long as what you say today is true, right? She says, yes. Who decides if you're lying? She says, the prosecutors. Miss Bang Golan, they trying to play with her name on here. They said, you were a graphic designer? You and Cassie would work on designs, including that on her tour, true? I'm guessing they meant tour. She says yes. All right. You were focused on a t-shirt design. And she says there were a lot of designs. She asked you to come over, right? She says yes. Then she says you suggested Cassie do a photo shoot in the pool in just a t-shirt. She says that wasn't the first idea, but yeah. They said you began to feel comfortable with her. She says, sounds about it. You spent the night. She says yes. You went to parties with Cassie. She says, not going to parties, we partied. Okay. You did a lot of things with Cassie. She says yes. How did marijuana make you feel? She said, sometimes hungry. How does ecstasy make you feel? She says, uplighted. How about G? She says, like the negative parts of alcohol. They asked, perk. She said, I threw up. They asked, Cocoa Puff? She says, blunt with weed and cocaine. Oh, they're going down the line. Would you agree with me that you and Cassie had a serious drug problem? She says, yes. You sold drugs to Cassie a lot. She says, yes. You got her hundreds of pills. She says, yes, they were hers. Name the drug dealers. She says, I don't know if I can. They said, let's refresh. In this job, your clothing line did not work out due to the skater mentality at Diamond Supply Company. She says, I believe they saw the vision, but whatever. You believe you were one of Cassie's best friends, right? She says, yes. But you didn't meet Mr. Combs for a year? You met in 2016, first time at your dinner at his house? She said, yes. He was standoffish with you, right? She says, yes. Did you talk with Deontay Nash after his testimony? She again says, yes. But not at his testimony, right? She says, we know what's going on. You don't need to talk because you know. They say objection is sustained. They come back and say, you hired Tyrone Blackburn to sue Mr. Combs. She said it was to seek justice. Your definition of justice is to sue Mr. Combs. She says, can you rephrase that? Suing for money. She says, yes. They say on November 2023, you were aware Cassie filed a lawsuit. You were working together then, right? She says, yes. May we have a sidebar? And then they say, you may. They come back. They says, Cassie included the balcony incident in her lawsuit. She says, true. Cassie said this happened at a hotel. True. She says she didn't say it like that. You said your apartment, it has a balcony. She says, I didn't say it like that. Cassie told you she never saw you over a balcony. She says, no, ma'am, I don't remember. They laugh and said, all right, right here. Read this page, then look up. You had these conversations. She says, I don't know. Oh, now she don't know. About this alleged balcony incident, you and Miss Ventura talked about the date of the place, who was there, and she says true. In 2015 and 2016, you didn't see any signs of violence, true? She says, I don't know the exact year. They said the birthday party. What drugs were you doing? She says, I don't remember. Alleged knife throwing incident. He just walked in and threw a knife. She says, I'm not sure. They said, are you telling the truth? They said, objection. It was sustained. Didn't you tell the government they would get in knife fights, plural? Cassie and Diddy was getting in knife fights? What the fuck? Knife fights is crazy. She says, I don't remember. How you don't remember if these niggas was getting in knife fights? I think I can remember every knife fight I've seen. And I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of them. Let me show you. I was suggesting where the knife came from. It said because it makes. She said I was suggesting where the knife came from. They said because it makes no sense. You're saying you don't know how he got how he got in to throw the knife, but once he's left, you're no longer worried? She says, I don't remember how I felt. You say a photo shoot with Mr. Combs he said I could kill you. She said yes. But at first you told the government it was a party. She says, I don't know. Okay, they working her right now. Your first demand letter said Mr. Combs said I could kill you while he hung you over the balcony. She said he did both, just not at the same time. They had a sidebar. They come back after a long sidebar. They said, you met the government in January 18th to 2024, didn't mention the I could kill you, but put in your subsequent demand letter. She said, yes, in a demand letter, I don't know when. They said, read this. She said the whole thing. They said this paragraph. They said the judge said as much as you want. She says, thanks, okay. They come back, the defense says, you didn't tell the government about I could kill you. And Tyrone was there. She says, yes, I let him go. They said drugs were expensive, right? She says, they are expensive. How you know they still expensive? They said now? She says, I don't know. Oh, now you don't see? First you said they are expensive. How you know they still expensive, shorty? Come on. Come on, we know what you're doing. I don't know. Did you run out of money for drugs? She says, I don't remember that. You and Cassie had drug partnerships. Drug partnerships? She said yes. Cassie would pay for the drugs. You'd go and buy them. She said yes. Did you meet the government on May 25th, 2025 and June 2, 3, and 4? She says, yeah, that's not that long ago. Oh, that's not long ago. She said, that's today. She says, I'm not good with dates. The balcony incident. Didn't you tell the government there was a party with the apartment? There was a party in the apartment. She said, I don't remember that. You told the government your girlfriend was in the bathroom. Not that you took her there. She says, my ex. Your complaint says you were smoking a cigarette on the balcony, not weed. She says, I don't remember. Different things. Okay. She says, yes. You told the government you recalled he was charging at you. She said, I don't remember. Didn't you first say Mr. Combs sexually assaulted you on the balcony? She says, I showed them where his hands were. I showed them where his hands were. You said he groped your breast. Or your lawyer said it. She said, my lawyer said that. Didn't you tell these prosecutors 2 days ago that you couldn't remember what happened out on that balcony? She says, I don't remember. You don't remember what drugs you were on? She says, no. Didn't you tell the government that you took Molly, G, and cocaine? She said, that's a lot of drugs. Didn't you take them all? She says, no, not all on that night. How much more did you have? She says, how much more can I get? And she laughed. Oh, it's a joke. I'd like to finish today. They asked how. I asked you how long. She says, quite a bit more. No, well, the judge asked, how much more did you have? Okay, I thought this was her laughing. The judge asked, how much more do we have? They said, how much can I get? They said, I'd like to finish today. And he asked, he said, I asked you how long. He says, quite a bit more. The juror said, you may go until 11 a.m. The jury leaves. He said, there's been a chilling effect on media coverage, even of the demeanor of the witnesses. The judge says, I don't think people in the courtroom and other courtrooms were trying to violate the order, nor do I think they were chilled. He said, I disagree that this has been... Okay, we're going to cut that. And now I'm going to continue. But they say, I disagree that there has been no chilling effect, at least with the respect of the mainstream press. Okay. And they adjourn after that. And that's all that they have for today. So that seems to be day 16, very light. They only seem to bring in this one person for the day. And she is all that they are going to do going into, it seems like to me they're going to have her out for the remainder of the week. But depending on how much more she has to say, that'll depend on how long we have to go through her. But that is day 16. Okay, we will continue to speak. Like I said, it's going to be a busy week for me. So you'll be getting more of the breakdowns like this in a little bite-sized form of content of Doja thoughts. And I'm just going to drop it like that, okay? So I appreciate everybody for coming out. We're going to continue to keep this content flowing and keep you in the loop of the Diddy trial, okay? So that's all I got to all my stoners, hippies, and hip-hop enthusiasts. I'm your boy, Dope Boy Diesel, and I'm out.
Yeah. Hey, this that special sauce. Spill that drip, I wipe it off. $1 million worth of game. Can't feel that I work too hard. Poetry only